The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fantasy NBA Today. My name is Neil Rochlani. I'm here with my co-host, Adrian Benjamins, to do the Friday show. And I, for the first time, am going to try to lead this. So if I screw up, Adrian, it's your fault. You said I could do it, so I'm going to blame you. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Neil. We've made it to the end of another week. Happy Friday, everybody. And Neil, you're ready to lead the ship, man. You've been doing this long enough. You are a smooth pro, and you're ready to take the reins. So lead the way, my man. Hey, Neil, what have you been up to? What have you been doing? I know you've kind of started putting together these listener leagues. Can you kind of tell us what you've been up to?
I have been knee-deep in helping the listeners and the readers of Hoop Ball get into these leagues, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I'm also excited to see how many people are interested already. I know last year we had about 120 participants, which was more than Dan, who led it last year, was expecting. And this year we're already more than halfway. We're like in the 60s. So we're more than 50% of the way there, and we're just starting to announce them. And a lot of people don't pay attention to leagues until later in the year, so I think they're really going to fill up. So it's been a labor of love. I try to get to it every night, so if you're listening and you're wondering why it takes a while for me to get back to you, I usually get to it in the evenings, and I'm here in Central Time in the U.S. I will say there's a couple different ways, if you're interested in the Hoop Ball League, to join. One is to follow Dan and I on Twitter. And actually, let me back up. I forgot to mention this is a Hoop Ball presentation. I don't know I don't have a script, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just trying this on my own. So anyway, there are a couple of different ways to join the Hoop Ball Listener Leagues. One is to follow Dan Bespris at Dan Bespris. Follow myself at Ball with Neil. That's Neil. And tweet at me and tell me which league you like to be in, whether it's the Rotisserie League or the head-to-head. And also whether you want to do a cash or a free league. The cash leagues are $50. And if one fills up, don't worry. We just keep opening up more, and we'll be able to balance them out at the end. I mean, what I mean is I'm sure we'll be able to fill out all the ones we open up. So don't worry about that. And the second way would be go to the Hoop Ball forum. There is under the Hoop Ball web page, there is a link for forums. And in there's a forum which Dan started, which is about the listener leagues. I think it's number one right now on the forum post because it gets the most attention. And just add your information there, your email, and I will email you the link to join the league. So hopefully that was clear, Adrian. I know you're going to be participating.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to avoid the one that you're in. Actually,
no.
I kind of want to be in the draft with you, and then I want to just that's what I want to see. I want to see if you go with your patented 3 bigs and 3 point guards to start the year.
Yeah, I've been fading that theory a little bit only because we talked about it on our previous show. There's some guys going late that I like a lot. Some point guards like DJ Augustine. And there's some centers also that I think you can get a little later, which normally isn't the case. So I'm still going to try out my theory. I still think I'm going to kind of stick to that, but I may just kind of taper off a little bit, maybe not go like 6 guys, meaning 3 point guards, 3 centers. I may just do, 2 point guards, 2 centers within my first 5 or 6 picks, and then snatch these guys that I'm targeting late. But yeah, man, I'm getting really excited, Neil. We're getting closer and closer to our draft season. Right now, we're still kind of in that lull period, but just the fact that you're getting these leagues ready. In one of my leagues, my 30-team dynasty league, we already started drafting. We just started drafting. It's a slow draft, 12 hours per pick. So I think we're about 18 picks in, and it takes a long time to finish the draft because it's so slow. But I just love that it feels like things are getting underway. So super exciting stuff, Neil, and really, really excited about you putting together these listener leagues. I'm super amped to be playing in leagues with Hoopball listeners. I can't wait. I'm going to do a head-to-head cash league, and then I'll probably join one of the free Roto leagues as well. What about you, Neil? What are you planning on playing?
I haven't joined yet, but I definitely will. I'll certainly try to join a league if there's like a couple spots needed towards the end to kind of help fill them out. I figured that's probably the best way to utilize my participation. I do want to make a note for anyone who hasn't signed up yet or who's interested. They all are 9-cat leagues, and so they're a little bit different for me. I know, Adrian, that might be a little bit new for you too. But the more leagues I do in different categories, the better I get at this. So I'm going to try to do a bunch of leagues this year. So I don't know where I'm going to end up, but I'm sure I'll be in. a few Hoopball listener leagues.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I try to do as many leagues as I can. It's just great experience, head to head. Roto, deep leagues, shallow leagues, dynasty leagues. I try to do a little bit everything just because I want the experience and I want the knowledge. Now, I usually prefer doing 8-cat leagues. I've done 9-cat leagues, plenty of 9-cat leagues, and I found that like turnovers, I don't know, they're just kind of a buzzkill. Like they just, all of the really great players are bad at turnovers. All of the guys who have the ball in their hands a lot or who have a lot of usage are usually really bad at turnovers, and I hate getting penalized for that. So I kind of tweaked a lot of my main leagues to be 8-cat, but I think I want to, just because I know the majority of people do play in 9-cat, I plan on going a lot more heavier for 9-cat leagues this year. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. It is definitely, my mindset is so set on 8-cat, but I'm definitely going to start thinking a lot more 9 category wise, like from here on out.
Yeah, I'm still trying to learn. Like I have many players' stats sort of memorized just by looking at the numbers over and over again in my spare time. But the turnover category is something I don't know very well, player by player. I know those who turn over a lot and those who actually, that's about all I know. I don't even know those who don't turn over a lot. I just know the high turnover guys because they get so much publicity. So I'm still learning, what those metrics are for like the 150. So today as I mentioned on yesterday's show, we're going to go over the Central League or Central Division, excuse me, and talk about winners and losers. Last week, Adrian, you and I talked about, was it last week or this week? I'm not even sure. It's all kind of a blur. But we started talking about the teams from a winners and losers perspective in the offseason and how we're kind of looking at them going into this season for fantasy value, team as a whole, and then some very quick breakdowns on players. And before we get into that, I don't see any really NBA news to talk about. Have you seen anything over the last 24 hours that you want to talk about?
No, it's been a really slow news period this past like 3 or 4 days. So I don't think there's really much for us to touch on as far as news goes. But let's get into the Central Division. I know as you mentioned last week, we what did we do? We did the Atlantic Division. Let's get in the Central Division. Let's talk about who won, who lost this offseason free agency period. Should we start with the Cleveland Cavaliers?
Take it away.
All right, let's start with the Cavs. And I guess I'll go first. I mean, I guess you got to say that they're the big losers because they lost LeBron James. They lost arguably the best player in the NBA. So anytime you lose a guy like that, once in a lifetime type player, you got to be considered a loser. But Neil, for fantasy purposes, I get a little bit excited about this team now because they just signed Kevin Love to a big deal. We know he's going to be the alpha on this team. He's going to be the main man. We really like his outlook. They also drafted a nice young point guard in Colin Sexton, a guy who I think is going to be pretty good. Now, for fantasy purposes, I'm not going to target him too high just because there's a lot of other good point guards that I'm looking at, and he could have efficiency issues to start. We were just talking about how we were going to focus on 9-cat. He could be a turnover. He could really have a high turnover problem. So, but I do think he will be a very useful player. And then, Neil, they got a lot of other guys that I'm really curious about. Jetty Osman is a guy that I think is I got on my sleeper list. This is a guy that I think can go really late in your draft, and I think he might have a pretty good season. I think he could put up mid-round value, and this is a guy you can probably get in the last 2 rounds of your draft. So they're a really interesting team fantasy-wise, but I'm going to just call them big losers just because they lost LeBron. What do you think, Neil?
Yeah, from a reality perspective, this team obviously is not going to be back in the championship game for a 5th year in a row. So, yeah, there's a couple things here on fantasy that kind of piqued my interest. Kevin Love is sort of like the big fish, as you talked about. Last year he finished, I'm looking at per game in 9-cat, and he finished 26th overall. And that was only on 28 minutes per game, and as you know, was not the lead guy there. So now that he's going to be the lead guy there, it's going to be very interesting to see. Dan and I had discussed this on a show a while ago about how high can he go. I thought 20s and the 20s were sort of his ceiling. Dan thinks a little bit higher. It'll be interesting to see. That one, if you take him in the 3rd round and he pops to 2nd or 1st round value, can be huge. And with respect to Chetty Osman, so I'm looking at their depth charts right now, and on their wing they're showing J.R. Smith and Kyle Korver starting, which I imagine is just laziness by the depth charts people. I don't think that's going to be the case. Do you think Chetty's going to start? Because if he does, then that changes everything. Because last year only got 11 minutes per game. Have you been following Cleveland, or is this more just sort of a gut based on what you saw last year?
So my depth chart that I've got penned down is got George Hill at the point guard spot, J.R. Smith at the 2, Jetty Osman at the small forward spot, Kevin Love at power forward, and then Tristan Thompson at center. Now, this team, they're a little deep because, as we mentioned, I like Colin Sexton, so I didn't even mention him. So, he could come in from George Hill. They got Jordan Clarkson, who can come in for J.R. Smith. As you mentioned, Kyle Korver. They just signed David Nwaba, another guy on the wing. So, Neil, they do have some depth here, but I'm not that worried. I think Jetty Osman's gonna kind of rise to the top. He can start at small forward. I don't trust Kyle Korver at all. We saw him just completely fade in this last season in the playoffs. He just, I just don't think he has it anymore. And so I think Jetty Osman's going to be the guy. Now, we're also not talking about Larry Nance is another guy in this front court. So there's a lot of interesting stuff here, Neil. Jordan Clarkson's a guy who could step up. I don't know. What do you think, Neil?
This one is going to be, I think, a team that there'll be value, but we don't know where it's going to be yet. And if you can get it right, I think this will be a huge one. I think Kevin Love is the only safe one you can take, but there will be value either from these young wing players like Osman, or maybe Nwaba gets more minutes, and then Nance could, and Sexton could get in there as well. I think I'm just gonna pay very close attention to the rotations in preseason and the news out of the beat writers there on how that might be playing out, because I think there will be 1 to 2 guys on this roster who will go maybe undrafted or very late in rounds that could provide like top 75 value. So I think there might be a couple good players here to target. I just don't know yet. It's too early to tell for me. I mean, my assumption is that these older players like J.R. Smith and Kyle Korver are not going to get much playing time. And like you said, they're going to move towards, or did you say, towards more youth through Kevin Love as sort of the facilitator. And George Hill versus Colin Sexton, I don't even know where that's going to end up. So we'll have to see what it looks like in training camp, what it looks like in preseason. For me, it's way too early to sort of make predictions outside. If Love falls to your 3rd round, which I doubt he will, definitely take him there, perhaps even earlier. Any final thoughts on Cleveland?
Yeah, one last thing that I want to note is that Cleveland should be very motivated to tank this year. So if their pick stays in the top 10, they keep it. If their pick falls out of the top 10, it goes to another team, and I can't think off the top of my head who that team is, which is going to drive me crazy. But so I would think that, if this team's not doing well and they hand it over to the youngsters, they're going to give the reins to Colin Sexton, Jetty Osman. I think, of course, Kevin Love will be safe all year, but I really think that those 2 guys eventually will get the bulk of the minutes. But you're absolutely right, Neil. I love your take where you said that likely there's going to be a guy or 2 from this team that's going to emerge with fantasy value that goes undrafted. It would not shock me at all if Jordan Clarkson turns things around this season, or if Larry Nance ends up being a solid fantasy asset. So, not guys that are going to be highly drafted at all, but could definitely make some noise. All right, Neil, I think we got to move on. We're taking way too long. We still got some more teams to go through. Let's move on to the next team. Let's talk about your Chicago Bulls, Neil. Would you consider them a winner or loser from this offseason?
I mean, I think from an excitement point of view, I think winner. I mean, the big move was, the 2 big moves, I guess. The most recent was the Jabari Parker signing. A lot of, I wouldn't say controversy, but a lot of people don't think he can be. I mean, right now they're trying to plug him as a small forward, and he may not be able to fit there, especially on the defensive end. So, but as far as talent goes, and obviously he's a hometown Chicagoan, so he can hopefully bring in excitement back to the Bulls. The Wendell Carter Jr. signing, or a draft that they got out of him, and then of course they signed Levine to the extension, were sort of like the big things of the offseason, and then letting go of Nwaba, who I kind of like, but is now in Cleveland. We just mentioned him. So I'm going to go with winners, I think. What do you think?
Man, I'm really torn because I want to say that they're big winners because I think they ended up with one of the best guys in this draft with Wendell Carter Jr. This guy looks amazing. He looks like the total package, and he's going to be great for this team. He's going to be a really good fit next to Lauri Markkanen, another guy I'm really excited to see his sophomore year. I hope he takes a couple steps forward and we see improvement from him because he surprised me a lot last year, Neil. I thought they messed up when they drafted Lauri Markkanen, and I need to eat a lot of crow because he was fantastic. The reason why I think I kind of want to say they're losers is because I'm not a big Jabari Parker fan, and I feel like I don't want him to take anything away from Lauri and from Wendell Carter. I got really disappointed because I thought to keep Zach LaVine, they kind of had to overpay for him because the Kings gave such a big offer to LaVine, and so the Bulls had to match. So that was a little disappointing that they had to spend so much money on him. But in the same, can understand why they wanted to keep him. I think Zach LaVine's got some high upside. I don't think we saw the best of him last year. So you know what, Neil, I was about 50-50 when I started talking. I'm going to sway the needle over to the winner side. I think they are winners. And I really liked what we saw from Chris Dunn last year. He looked really good when he looked really good as a starting point guard on this team. I hope we see him improve as well. And Neil's a kind of, as you said, is kind of an exciting starting five. They got a legit starting five here. And I think for fantasy, I'm really curious to see who's going to be the studs as far as fantasy goes, because, we don't really quite know yet what the rotation is as well. Like, is Robin Lopez going to start at center, or are they just going to hand things over to Wendell Carter? You have to think Lauri Markkanen's got to be safe, but, you really don't know what's going to happen. We didn't see Zach LaVine 100% healthy. What's the usage going to look like with him starting the season ready to go? I don't know, Neil. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think there is going to be 4 guys that I can trust in terms of minutes, and that's Dunn, Parker, LaVine, and Markkanen. And for me, that's the key driver for fantasy value, or a key driver, I should say, for fantasy value. So I none of those guys could be great, but they all could be very good, and it's just a matter of, can you get value on them when you draft. And we haven't seen the rankings yet from Yahoo and what all the other experts are saying, so I don't know yet. But I think those 4 guys will be fantasy relevant and trustworthy in terms of their minutes. Chris Dunn only played 29 minutes last year, and it was still in ACAT he was very good, like in the 50s, and probably in the 70s, I think, for 9CAT because of all of his turnovers. The one thing that I do not worry about, but the one thing that I will be probably hesitant on drafting is Wendell Carter, because I think he may not get as many minutes as we hope. I think Lopez has proven to be a very good reality player, if not very aesthetically pleasing or a very good fantasy player anymore, but he's a solid NBA player, and as long as he's still on the roster, I think he's going to get some minutes there. So I might avoid Carter Jr., but I do like him for the long term, as you said. The one loser on this team in terms of minutes, I think, is Bobby Portis, who last year had some pickup-worthy spots. This year, I don't think he's going to be fantasy relevant, along with Justin Holiday and Denzel Valentine. Those 2 guys, unless there are injuries, I don't think they have any relevance in 12-team leagues. So that's sort of my first take on this. Other thoughts, Mr. Benjamins?
Yeah, I agree. I think, we're definitely going to be fading Bobby Portis. Justin Holiday is a guy that a lot of people took a shot on last year. I don't think we can definitely trust him at all with the way this rotation's looking. Denzel Valentine, I don't think we're going to draft any of these guys. And I like your take on Wendell Carter, although I am going to definitely be trying to draft him really late in all my leagues. I think eventually he's going to be the starting center. I think maybe at the very start of the season, we'll see Robin Lopez get the start, but I think eventually it's going to be Wendell Carter Jr. He's just too good. He's too ready. And there's just no reason for them to hold him back. So I love taking a shot at him like the last 2 rounds of all of my leagues. So that's my plan. All right, Neil, let's move on to the next team. Let's talk about the Indiana Pacers. And, they had a really interesting offseason because they kept their core pretty much together, and they added guys like Tyreek. Would you consider them winners or losers from the offseason?
From a reality perspective, I think they're definitely winners. I think re-signing Thaddeus Young and getting Evans, Oladipo, I think is just going to get better. Miles Turner had a very off year, and I think he's going to be better. Sabonis is still going to grow. Not a lot of things. I mean, the only thing I'm not really excited about is the Doug McDermott signing. So other than that, though, I think they're winners. Fantasy-wise, a little more challenging to predict now that they have another high-usage guy in Tyreek Evans. I don't know if he's going to overlap with Oladipo and take away some of his sort of productivity that he had last year. I'm looking for a bounce back in Miles Turner. Bojan Bogdanovic I'm still staying away from. And I guess Darren Collinson will be their starting point guard, which he tends to get overlooked. We had talked before the show about there are guys late in the or maybe this is during the show. I'm sorry. I'm getting tired. Guys that can be picked up, point guards late in the draft that usually aren't there, and Darren Collinson might be one of them. Your thoughts on this team?
Yeah, this is a really intriguing team for fantasy. Victor Oladipo, what an amazing season he had last year. I think he's going to be great again this year. A little worried that some of these other guys could emerge and take some away from him, but I still think I'm going to try to draft him pretty early in all my leagues. I really love that they kept the core together. Thaddeus Young coming back. Darren Collison is, as you mentioned. I, like you, am really hoping that Miles Turner takes that step forward that we thought he was going to take last season. He really let a lot of us down. I know me personally, I drafted him really early in a lot of my leagues and didn't return the value that I was hoping he would. But I still believe in Miles Turner. And from what I'm hearing, he's having a great off season. He's adding some muscle, looking really good. So I will definitely be targeting Miles Turner. And then the Tyreek Evans edition is really interesting, Neil. I tend to think he's going to lead their second unit. So he's going to come off the bench as more of that 6-man type. But definitely there'll be times where he's probably on the court with the first unit. Maybe he can play small forward next to Victor Oladipo, next to Darren Collison. So I kind of like Tyreek Evans as a like mid-round or later type guy. He's super injury prone, so I normally don't target him ever, but he looked pretty good last year. So just a really interesting team to watch this offseason. But I think, they got a lot of quality players, and I think they're going to have a lot of nice fantasy assets. And bottom line, I'm going to consider them winners from this offseason. All right, Neil, let's keep moving here. We're running a little long. Next team up, let's talk about the Milwaukee Bucks. What are your thoughts on the Bucks? Would you consider them winners or losers?
Well, they got Brook Lopez, so right there they're winners, along with Ilyasova. Two guys who are not the fastest guys, but add talent to your basketball teams. I am going to be very curious to see how Lopez does this year. He was someone who was once a very good fantasy player and has really fallen off to almost irrelevancy. So I'm curious to see where he gets ranked. He's one of those guys that can still add value if he gets enough time. Doesn't do a lot of rebounds, but his blocks are still pretty solid. I'm assuming they'll still stay up there, along with a very good free throw percentage guy for a big man. He's developed a 3-point shot. So I like this team from a fantasy perspective. I'm probably not going to get Giannis. I don't think his name's a little bit above his ability in terms of fantasy value, not in terms of reality value. Actually, why don't I turn it over to you? I'm kind of blanking a little bit on how to really break this team down. Do you have any thoughts on Milwaukee right now?
So you're going to laugh at me right now. I'm going to call them big winners because, Neil, have you seen Giannis? He is yoked right now, man. He is ripped. He's been working out. His arms look huge. This guy, dude, he looks like a monster, Neil. And I think he's going to blow up this year. I'm so easily buy into the muscle watch hype. It's bad. It's really bad. But no, I think Giannis is going to have a huge year. Chris Middleton was amazing last year. Eric Bledsoe sounds like he's healthy. I think he had some thumb issue going into the offseason. I was reading that it hasn't been an issue and that he looks good. Malcolm Brogdon's another guy who could have some value. You mentioned the addition of Brook Lopez. We've never seen this team with a high-end scoring type center. Brook Lopez, the last few seasons he's added that outside shot to his game. He can stretch the floor. I really like the addition of Brook Lopez from a reality standpoint. Now, fantasy-wise, I'm not going to be targeting Brook Lopez too high just because, he's not going to be the number one option on this team. Isn't usually a high block or rebound type guy, but reality-wise, I do like the fit. And I do think he will have, excuse me, I do think he will have fantasy value, but I just won't be drafting him too high. But I really like this team, Neil. I'm going to call them fantasy winners. And, we've seen this team play well, make the playoffs. I'm hoping that they take that next step and go deeper into the playoffs. And I really like this team, Neil. What do you think?
Yeah, I really like him. They got the new coach who was proven he can take teams better than their individual players and make the sum better. So I think they'll be above an 8 seed this year, and I believe there was an 8 seed last year. Maybe I'm wrong, but they were. I know they lost this. Maybe it was a 7. But anyway, I think they'll be in the top, maybe 5th of the East, top 5 of the East. I'm very curious to see where Bledsoe gets ranked and Middleton. Middleton had a huge year last year, sort of under the radar, a top 20 player or top 25 player. Bledsoe in the 30s. Both those guys get very much overshadowed by Giannis. I like both of their fantasy values coming in the season if they don't get the hype. So I'll be keeping a close eye on those two players. I know we are running late, so should we?
Let's do one more team.
Yes, the Detroit Pistons. They're the last ones, right?
Last team, Neil. What do you think about the Pistons? Do you consider them winners or losers?
Gosh. Well, I would say neutral. It definitely really didn't get any better, right, from what I'm seeing. The only addition to this team that makes me interested in thinking about fantasy next year is Glenn Robinson III. I know it's kind of out of left field, and I certainly won't take him anywhere in the first 10 rounds, and maybe not until my last pick. But if he somehow can get that starting small forward position in Detroit, I think he could have fantasy value this year. So he was injured all last year when he was on, I believe, Indiana, and now he's over here in Detroit. There was buzz last year that he might actually break out last year. Unfortunately, he got injured. I don't think I'll be looking at Reggie Jackson that much. Maybe a last-round pick. Reggie Bullock, I'll probably stay away from unless he's there very late. And then Drummond and Griffin are the other two, the two big front court guys. I've never been a big Blake Griffin fan in terms of fantasy. And Drummond I've stayed away from in 8-cat league because of his free throw percentage. I have targeted him in 9-cat league when I'm punting. So that was all a very quick way to say that I'm not sure, except I don't think they've gotten any better. This is a team that I thought was going to make the playoffs last year, and now I don't even think they'll make it this year again. What do you think about the Pistons?
Yeah, Neil, you and I are a lot alike, and I, like you, they didn't really make too many changes. They did change their head coach. I believe Dwayne Casey is now the coach of the Pistons, which I think actually could help them. I didn't really like what Van Gundy was doing there, so I think this could help them. But as from a roster standpoint, they pretty much have the same core. So it's hard to call them winners or losers. They didn't really add anyone. They didn't really lose anyone. So, they just kind of in this neutral gear. But I'm hearing that Andre Drummond's having a really good offseason. He's slimmed down. I like your take. I agree with you. I usually don't ever look at Drummond just because he'll kill your free throw percentage. I hate losing free throw percentage. And then Blake Griffin, not a guy I'm usually high on. Doesn't really get those defensive stats. The rebounds likely won't be there with playing next to Andre Drummond. I do like him, though, as a reality player. And, he is a pretty good fantasy player. He's just never a guy that I highly target. And then I'm not too excited about this wing situation or backcourt, Neil. Reggie Jackson, we've learned he's not really a high-end point guard. We haven't seen him healthy in a while. So kind of curious to see if we see an improved Reggie Jackson now that he's had a whole offseason to get over the injury problems that he's had. Reggie Bullock, a guy that flashed some talent. Let's see if he can improve and keep taking steps forward. And then no one else really that I'm really super interested in. So, we kind of know who the guys to target here. And, I can't really call them a winner or a loser. I'm kind of with you on this one, Neil.
Yeah, I think I'll be staying away from a lot of these players come this draft. All right, should we wrap this up? Do you have anything else you want to add? Do you want to talk about your weekend plans? Do you want to talk about your cold? Do you want to talk about... I felt like I should have handed you a glass of water there through the internet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know. I was trying to I was trying to get you to put this recording back a little bit. I just today just woke up, just kind of felt a little out of it. I was like, oh man, I hope I'm not coming down with something. Just felt I've just been, I don't know, just a little under the weather all day, but you're not going to hear a peep out of me. No complaining out of me. I'm happy it's Friday, Neil. Happy the weekend's here. No big plans for the weekend. My lady's going out of town. She's going to Catalina with the girls. So I got the kiddos all to myself. But, when my wife heads out of town, it's super mellow and it's just kickback time. So I'm just looking forward to a relaxing weekend. I really wanted to get into some mock drafts, but there's nobody in those mock drafts yet over at ESPN. So I'm really hoping that Yahoo opens their mock drafts soon because I want to get in there, man. What about you, Neil? Any big plans for the weekend?
Nothing too crazy. I've started been working a little bit harder than normal, so I'm a little tired. So maybe I'll just relax. I could see myself in a mock draft, and if anyone out there listening wants to get in a mock draft with Adrian and I'm sure we'd be happy to hop in with you, as we like to have real people in there. Sorry, that's my very loud dryer. I didn't think that
maybe we can get some listeners to hit us up on Twitter. Maybe we can get enough people. I know there's a couple of the Hoopball staff that want to join in too. Maybe we could just get enough people for us to jump in to our own mock draft. We can all just do a mock draft together this weekend, man. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm going to say you can organize that because I am I would love to do that, but I'm a little bit busy with this Hoopball League stuff. So hit up at Adrian Benjamins if you want to mock with this man and myself, and I'm sure he can connect us together as well. I'm also at Ball with Neil. And with that, thanks, Adrian, for letting me take the lead on this, and everyone out there, have a great weekend.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.